stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Also, I think it's
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
The amount of use, I just feel bad.
And I just note for the record that all the members of the Planning Commission are present this evening. First item is the adoption of the agenda. I would perhaps like to rearrange it a bit for the Dotson Tourist Home, for that to move to the front of the public hearings, because that is a carryover from last time and had just a couple of details to discuss before we get into new business. If no one is averse to that, I would make that motion.
Well, Madam Chairman, can I also suggest that maybe right after the Dotson, that we have the Chester Gap item on the agenda, since we've got so many people here?
That sounds good. So the first item then would be the carryover, the Dotson Tourist Home, and then the second the first public hearing, the second item on the agenda would be the Chester Gap Baptist Church special exception, and then followed by the Sperryville Hollow LLC and the 2 Blue Rock applications. I would amend my motion to that effect.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, and with that, we have the adoption of the minutes from July 19th.
I so move.
To adopt the minutes as presented.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atkins. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
You weren't present
I was
for that
not here.
meeting? Okay, thank you, Brian. That takes us to the first item of business on the reordered agenda, the Dotson Tourist Home special exception. Michelle, would you mind reintroducing that for us and letting us know what we need to do this evening?
This is a special exception permit for a 3-bedroom forest home located at 37 Bronson Lane, tax map number 38-41. Mrs. Dotson owns this parcel, which is 6.9 acres in size, along with contiguous parcels totaling a total of 58 acres. At the last meeting, the Planning Commission tabled this in regards to the width of the right-of-way, meeting the Type 2 road standards. Through deep research, I did find that Bronson Lane is a 30-foot wide right-of-way, and that in our Type 2 road standards, that if the road is already constructed, it only requires a minimum of a right-of-way of 20 feet.
Thank you, Michelle. So I think that picks up where we left off, if there's any further discussion on this application. Do we have a motion to move this forward with a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors?
With the staff recommendations.
All right, Ms. Ritter, so you're making a recommendation for approval to the Board of Supervisors with the staff recommendations included in the report?
I do.
All right, and that's the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. All those in favor, or is there any further discussion on this application?
Aye.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, that takes us to our first public hearing of the evening, the Chester Gap Baptist Church special exception. If you wouldn't mind to cue that up for us, please, Michelle?
Absolutely. Special exception 230704 is made by Chester Gap Baptist Church. They have applied for a special exception to continue their use of their parcel related to church-related activities. The property is located on Headwaters Road. It is identified by attachment number 1-87D. The parcel is 24.33 acres in size, and it is zoned village residential. Most of you may remember last year the church came before the commission to seek a permit for approval for church-related activities such as outdoor worship, picnics, and community functions. It was approved with the conditions of a 2-year time limit, the number of events, cars, and that any new permanent structure will require another permit. At this time, while we're still within the time limitation of that permit, the church would like to be able to construct a pavilion as part on this parcel. It would be a roof with open sides and a concrete floor, which brings us to this application. VDOT and the Health Department have no objections to this request. Staff has recommended roughly the same conditions as the prior permit, but this time with no time limitation since they plan to construct a permanent structure. The other conditions would be at 5 events per calendar year with a maximum of 20 days, a maximum of 40 cars. An event is defined as greater than 20 people. No amplifiers after 10:30 p.m. Only outdoor recreation and services permitted. Any new permanent structure other than the pavilion will require another special exception permit. But this does not apply to any temporary tents that they may use for a function. Compliance with all state and local laws, and that the property is not to be rented to anyone else.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Is the applicant present? Did you wish to add anything at this time?
I'm Paul Strasser, I'm pastor.
Would you mind to use the microphone, please?
Sure.
That way everything is captured for the record.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
My name's Paul Strasser. I'm the pastor at Chester Gap Baptist.
Did you have anything to add in regards to the application at this time?
No, we're just looking for a simple picnic type shelter.
Thank you. All right, well, if you are certainly going to have an opportunity to add comments later, but let's go ahead and open up the special hearing, or the public hearing at this time. This is in particular for the Chester Gap Baptist Church Special Exception Permit TM number 1-87D. If you are here to speak in regards to this application, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for this application. You're welcome to come to the mic, state your name and the district in which you reside, and make your comments for the record. Is there anyone that wishes to speak? This is your only opportunity to speak on this application. All right, if no one wishes to speak on the Chester Gap application, I'll go ahead and declare the public hearing closed. Fellow board members, I'll turn to you for comments. Mr. Shulin, this is, I think, located in the district that you represent, so you can either...
I was up there recently with the pastor and I believe Ms. Grove, and it hadn't changed much except for there were leaves on the trees, and it's amazing how isolated that location is. You can't see any roofs, none of the neighbors, nothing in Warren County. It was really kind of interesting, the stark difference between winter and summer. I think when we put this through the last time to the board supervisors, this was an expectation, and I have no objections to what they're planning to do in their use.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shulin. Ms. Ritter?
So we did receive a letter from one of the neighbors who's concerned that the drainage off the road will interfere with the quality of his water. And I'm wondering if you guys, so I drove up there and I did notice that, there are a lot of ruts. I'm assuming that if you build something up there, that you're gonna have to repair the road somewhat, and maybe you could think about how to get the drainage so it doesn't go into a spring. I know the health department didn't have an issue with it, but if there was something you could do to make sure that his spring water remains pure, that would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Ritter. Mr. Sisk?
You stated the event wouldn't go beyond about 10 o'clock. Was that correct? Or?
That's right.
Okay. And then the lighting, I assume, will be the downward lighting, not up street neighbors?
Yes, sir.
Any questions I have?
Did you want to address the comment about the runoff?
Yes, thank you. We actually had somebody come look at it from, and I probably have the initials wrong, but DEQ or some.
Yeah.
So, and he suggested that if we wanted to, we could put a riparian, at each of those culverts. We hadn't done anything because we don't know exactly what that would add or take away from his spring. It was just that, well, you could. It wasn't even a suggestion. We feel like the runoff hasn't changed from the site. There's just that road there.
Yeah.
If anything, it's more, directed as you go down the property to the right side, opposite of his, not, towards it. It's only the two culverts now. We would be prepared to do any gutter work or anything like that for the structure because I know a roof in place will alter it. Outside of that, it's kind of the way God made it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Yes, ma'am.
addressing.
Mr. Atkins?
Do you have erosion control stone at the inlet and outlet of those crossover pipes?
I'm sorry, there is some stone present at the outlet side. I had not looked at the inlet side. But it has been sowed with grass on both sides. So there, and the last time I was up there after a rain, it wasn't folded over. So I don't know if that helps.
That would be my recommendation, that you would have someone to look into that and add some type of siltation or erosion control at the inlet end as well as the outlet end.
Yeah, we do have the stakes and the, I know it's
Silt
not,
fencing?
the black, it's almost like burlap, the stuff that's approved for, I'm sorry, I'm not real familiar with that as to what it's called, but we do have that in place. And then along the side of the property between the Vidito property and ours, along that, we have that black silt
Yes.
stuff in,
And
yeah.
if I may help out and intervene, when the construction was going on, when they leveled the pad out and the road was put in, all E&S measures were inspected by the county and complied with. So all of that has been in place and taken care of.
Right.
All right, then one other comment, I noticed number 4 here says no amplifiers after 10:30 p.m. And I think most of all the other locations in the county, we have put that cutoff time at 10 o'clock. So I would recommend that 10:30 be changed to 10 o'clock.
Would that be agreeable to you
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
application? Well, that makes life easy.
Yeah.
Mr. Light?
Thank you. And thank you for the comments and the question about the lighting. That was the one thing I noticed. I didn't see anything in the application about your intent to light, but you are intending to electrify and light?
We have power on the property as it stands now. There's a meter base and breaker box, so we wouldn't, according to Virginia code, we wouldn't have to get another permit, put in another breaker box. We would just sublet off. So it would, ceiling fans or lighting just to make it comfortable, underneath that structure. We're not looking to project any light beyond the structure.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I guess that's another potential, something I would prefer to see kind of formalized so that the lighting is down shielded or undercover. Would you be amenable to that?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions about it.
The building you're proposing to build is a nice building with a concrete floor. And with your uses that you stated here, worship service, picnics, church meetings, and community engagements, just a few, maybe an occasional wedding of somebody.
Yes, sir.
It seems like, you would use up your 5 events pretty quickly. I think maybe you should have a bigger number there so you don't run up against problems with the neighbors. I know you're gonna make apple butter up there.
We hadn't planned on it. My apple butter guy is here. He could tell us.
That could be an event, that could be, you'll have more than
Yes, sir.
40 people, that you can use up one there.
And I appreciate you making mention of that. We would certainly love that. We are trying to illustrate,
I mean,
you know,
probably
to
gonna
the
have
committee
Easter-
that we're trying to stay within
Yeah.
what we've already agreed to
I mean,
and
you
not, you know, try to stretch.
I mean, Easter sunrise service, that uses up one.
Yes, sir.
Church reunion, church homecoming, that's another one. I mean, I think you're just kind of harnessing yourself before you even get started here. I think, with what you're doing here, and, I mean, if this was purchased for residential, development with village zoning, I mean, that's what, 1 acre lots or less?
1 acre.
You could do 20 houses there. So I think a pavilion that you're gonna use 10 times for the summer is very reasonable. And I would propose, along with a couple of changes about the downshielding of the lights and 10 o'clock music, to push it up to 10 events. I don't think that's being unreasonable against the neighbors. I'm making a motion that we're going to be doing amendments up to 10.
We would certainly appreciate
Yeah, I
that.
think it's totally reasonable. I hope you use it that much. I mean,
Thank you.
that's the
We
only
do too.
facility like that up in Chester Gap. You know, if the community wants to use it, if you're willing to let the community use it, so I think it's a benefit to everyone.
Yes, sir. We see ourselves serving the entirety there, not just the members of the church.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
That sounds good. So was that a motion then now? I think you hit all the highlights, the staff report, so.
Well, it's Mr. Schuler's district, so I would hope he would make the motion for us to follow.
I move that we put this, push this on to the Board of Supervisors with recommendation of approval with the conditions as stated by Michelle, to include 10 events per year, and to ensure that any additional lighting outside the pavilion be downward shielding or pointing towards Front Royal. Maybe just downward shield.
And 10 o'clock then?
And yeah, 10:30 to 10 o'clock, to be consistent.
That sounds
Thank
good.
you, Mr. Rack.
So I believe that's a motion that's captured all of our points of discussion for the evening. Thank you, Mr. Schulin. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sisk. Any further discussion? Thank you all for coming out this evening. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you at the Board of Supervisors. You're welcome to stay or free to go as you please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a nice evening. We'll be up for apple butter.
Last weekend in October.
Lovely.
Sounds good.
Once you're on the kid, time's still me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening. That takes us on to the next agenda item, the Sperryville Hollow LLC Special Exception 23-08-01 for a tourist home. Ms. Summers, would you mind to
I'll be happy to.
introduce that? Thank you.
Special exception 230801, Sperryville Old Hollow LLC, through their manager Paige Klink, have applied for a special exception to operate a two-bedroom tourist home located at 487 Old Hollow Road, identified by tax map number 2620B. The property is 33.862 acres in size, and it is zoned agricultural and conservation. In 1994, the previous owners obtained a special use permit for a family apartment. The current owners now wish to use this structure as a short-term rental. They do live on the property part-time, and they will only rent out that home when they are there on the property. The health department commented the existing dwelling is approved for two-bedroom sewage disposal system. VDOT had no objections to this request. Staff proposed the following conditions: a maximum of 4 guests, 2 bedrooms, no food service to be offered to the renters of the facility. The permit terminates upon sale or transfer of the property, and that the property may not be subleased, rented by a third party, or used as a timeshare.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. And if you all would like to comment on your application, certainly you may do so now or after the public hearing.
Sure, I'll comment after that.
Okay. Well, with that, then I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on the Sperryville Hollow LLC tourist home application. If anyone wishes to speak on this application, this would be your opportunity to do so. Is there anyone wishing to speak? All right. If there's no one that wishes to speak on this tourist home application, I'll go ahead and declare the public hearing closed. And if there's anything that you would like to add, you're welcome to do that, or you can just address comments from the commission. All right. I believe this is in Piedmont District, if you'd like to kick it off.
So you're good with the 2 adults, or excuse me, 2 groups, 4 people?
Yes.
How far from the main roadway would you estimate your roadway is your private road?
100 yards, 200
Okay.
yards. It's up the hill.
Up the hill?
Up the
So
hill.
in
A long walk,
the,
straight up.
are you gonna have them park at the bottom, like
No.
wintertime, or are you gonna have someone take care of that, or?
Well, we would be plowing for ourselves to get
Okay.
up that roadway, but the cottage is behind
Okay,
the main house, so they'll have the benefit of all the things that we take care of.
okay. And no, I mean, I looked at the acreage and everything, it's back in there, so, I mean, I don't think you're gonna have too many neighbors
I don't know if
complaining.
anybody will ever want to come.
No.
Are you keeping the pond stocked still?
Well, we're not running a track, we are fishing it, so also.
And you don't anticipate adding extra lighting, because it's already in existence,
It's so
right?
dark up there that people have to have a flashlight, but it's just got lights by the doors right now.
That's really the only the question I had was the road, so.
Did you have?
I've spent many an hour fishing with my children in that pond, and it was really the only place they could catch fish, so it was really exciting. I actually walked up that driveway, and the one thing that I was a little concerned about was that, I could be wrong, but where the septic field is, that it looked like there were trees growing on the septic field.
We had trees removed when we bought the property.
Going into the septic
Yeah,
field,
that's
so,
what I was-
yeah, so we had those taken out and wound up taking a lot more than that because they accidentally used glyphosate and got a lot of trees around, so it's clear.
I just couldn't figure out like where the lines were, and I just thought that makes sense.
Yeah, it was close, it was something we looked at when we bought the property. You were exactly right.
Did you have anything, Brian?
My only thing was not really concerning the application, but, let me see what I really put. One second, I'm sorry, I had it. In the conditions, something new caught my eye.
Subleased, rented.
The sublease rented to a third party or used as a timeshare.
So that was added at the request of the Commissioner of Revenue. That would be a condition of all new tour homes after a meeting.
So that must be something she's seeing.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't understand that.
Would you know why she did that? It has to do with the
I think there's a
application.
situation out there right now where this is happening.
I don't see how the tax is not being collected. If I rented the place and paid for it, and she pays the taxes, and then I can't make it, and I let someone else use it, taxes have been collected.
Well, Mr. Sure, I think I can give you a scenario.
All right.
So maybe you have a property that may not qualify, and you try to go around the regulations and get by with everything. So you rent it to somebody for 3 months, and instead of, but they walk out after one weekend or 1 week. Or they lease it to somebody else, so they're using these things like that to circumvent the ordinance.
They're subletting that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That seems to be not a problem with an Airbnb as opposed to just a regular short-term renter type issue. I
Well,
don't see what.
these people are using a long-term to do a short-term.
There has been instances, or there may be an instance.
Yes, yes.
But in order for this fix to apply to that, those people would have to be coming here for us to apply this condition, so it does.
Yeah.
So I think they're just putting this in, so they're just trying to close up a loophole.
Yeah.
They're honestly.
I mean, they've been struggling with this for a couple of years. They tried-
So you're telling me that the county there's an issue where we've pushed, we forwarded an application recommended for approval to the Board of Supervisors for an Airbnb that is being sublet out, and somehow the county's not getting their money?
Yes. Because it never got approved.
Well, that's different than not being approved, but I'm saying coming before us.
No, I think she just put it in here just so that it just kind of applies to everyone, that you can't sublease once you lease it. It may be smacking somebody's finger that hasn't done anything wrong, but this.
Clearly, she didn't done anything wrong, so.
It hasn't done anything.
But it's also so reverse, the issue is the reverse.
I just think we're not fixing any problem with this.
No.
That was my only question about this application. I went up there, I was disappointed I didn't have my fishing pole or password to the gate.
You said you wanted the trouble.
I didn't want to walk all the way up there.
It was a nice day.
I got stopped by a neighbor, and that killed the next hour and a half, so. I enjoyed that too.
Thank you, Brian. Did you have anything to add, Mr. Atkins?
No, I think this application is a good fit.
Yeah, I know, when the Trot Farm closed, some people reached out and were very concerned. They loved that property and they wanted to see it, be put to a good use. And, short of it becoming like a public park, this is a nice way to keep it open for people to be able to visit and enjoy. So I was glad to see the application, and thank you for bringing it forward. I didn't have any questions about the application. Mr. Light?
Well, my only observation, and I support it, is one thing that's a little different about this than some of the others is the original approval as a family apartment. But I am, I would just note that was in '94, so it would be. I might have a different view if that were in 2022, but just because I think there's some potential there for kind of, again, working the system as jointly, but I don't see that present here, so I'm happy for that. I was also glad to hear that your intent to only rent it out while you're there. That seems like another factor that we sometimes get into about these kind of remote these sorts of homes that don't have somebody present. So those are both just observations, but I agree with what's been said, and I support the application.
Mr. Henry, did you have anything to add?
I just wanted to clarify that under the VDOT here it states that the property is located in a private drive. The parent property of 33 acres has state road frontage. It's just is a driveway off the state road, so it's not a private road like we dealt with earlier in the Dotson application. This is simply a driveway on the property that comes in off the state road.
Sounds good. Well, I think we're all over one mind about this application. Mr. Sister, did you want to make that motion on this application this evening?
Yeah, I'd make the motion to move it forward to the board supervisors and everything that was agreed on, the 4 adults and everything for the consideration.
All right, so we have a motion to forward this to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendations in the staff report. Do we have a second for that motion? Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you all, we'll look forward to seeing you at the board of supervisors.
Okay.
You're welcome to stay, you're welcome to go,
Thanks.
whatever you prefer. Thank you for coming out tonight. See you later. All right, that takes us to the last two public hearings for the evening. Both are in regards to the Blue Rock Inn property. Since we have these advertised as two separate special exception, Michelle, I think we have to hear these as two separate public hearings, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
First up, we have application, special exception number 230702, Dalian Real Estate LLC. They have applied for an expansion of their country inn permit. The property is operated under a special exception 870407 and 921002 with accommodations for up to 5 rooms for overnight lodging, a banquet facility in the current structure, tennis courts, down shielded lighting, and a curfew of 10 p.m. for their music. The owner is now proposing to amend the number of rooms, the ability to subdivide the property, to construct a banquet facility, and move the existing caretaker cottage. First, it is proposed to increase the accommodations to 19 rooms, accommodating no more than 38 overnight guests. Rather than operating in one overly large hotel-like structure, it is proposed that the rooms would be accommodated in 3 separate structures with 5 rooms in each, along with 4 rooms in the original building. This will be phased over time as needed. Second, the ability to subdivide the parcel of 79.56 acres into 3 parcels. One parcel would be approximately 60 acres. That would include the existing barns and horseback riding facilities, as well as the inn itself. This would limit any further expansion with 60 acres to accommodate the required minimum acreage matching RCC 170-65E, which is in no case shall the density of development as measured by 2-person occupancy units exceed 8 units per 25 gross acres. Also, country inns, retreats, or lodges should not exceed a maximum of 20 units of accommodation. The other 2 parcels would be 10 acres each. One 10-acre parcel would include the tourist home, and the other 10-acre parcel could include a permitted primary dwelling with a possible of accessory dwelling unit. The third item that is proposed is to construct a separate banquet facility. Currently, the banquet facility is in the original structure with a limit of 100 guests. It is proposed to construct a separate structure elsewhere on the property for up to 200 guests, not to exceed an average of 1 to 2 events per week. Finally, it is proposed to remove the manager caretaker cottage and replace it elsewhere on the property to provide a home for the inn's manager or owner. VDOT had no objections, provided that the main entrance with the existing right turn lane and commercial entrance function as the main ingress-egress for what is proposed. The health department commented that the inn is currently permitted to operate a bed and breakfast with 5 rooms. In addition, the inn has a full-service restaurant with a VDH permitted kitchen. For the proposed structures, the owners will need to obtain any permits for the new units for the new septic systems. The proposed banquet facility has an approved sewage disposal system. Conditions for that drain field are a warming kitchen only for use by caterers, 600 gallons per day flow, limited to no more than 2 events per week, 200 guests per event with events no longer than 3 hours in duration. Staff has recommended the following conditions. The Rappahannock County cross-country team still reserves the right to utilize the perimeter of the property as previously agreed upon. An event held on the property shall not exceed 200 guests. No amplified outdoor music. Any non-amplified music played outdoors must cease at 10 p.m. Maximum number of overnight guests shall not exceed 38, and the maximum number of rooms shall not exceed 19. The property may be divided into 3 parcels, in which the lot is located on, the lot that the inn is located on shall be at least 60 acres. Exterior light in excess of 60 watts shall be downshielded so that the light source is not visible from adjacent properties. The caretaker cottage may be removed and constructed on the same lot as the inn for the manager or owner to reside in. It shall not be for rent. And the health department conditions that I previously stated.
Is that everything, Ms. Summers?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and I think the applicant and his representation is here tonight, and you're welcome to address the commission at this time.
Madam Chair, thank you. Michael Brown, representing the applicant. What I'd like to do is introduce Mr. Dowling and then reserve a few minutes of time to the end of the public hearing just to address any questions that might arise. So Nick Dowling, who is the actual applicant in connection with this, would like to take a few minutes and address the commission.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff. Appreciate your time. Also appreciate you guys delaying a month. We had some last minute health issues for Mike and unavailability for me, so we appreciate you guys being flexible with us on this. I came to Rappahannock about 30 years ago and actually stayed in the Blue Rock, although at the time, you guys may remember, it was called the Bleu Rock, spelled French, because I think the brothers had the French restaurant then. And of course, fell in love with the county and fell in love with the property and so forth back then. I really loved everything about it. Fast forward to 2019, and I was looking for a property to spend time out in this beautiful part of the country. And I saw the Blue Rock, looking at that time a little disheveled, mostly sort of a little bit out of business, no more restaurant, and really said, this looks like the right opportunity. A beautiful property that's been here for a long time for me to invest a little bit and bring it back a little bit. And that's what we've tried to do. And I think hopefully folks in the county have seen that in terms of revitalizing the inn, finishing that half-built house that was on the property. We've recently painted the barns to make them look much prettier, fixed up some of the real estate. We just put in new fences. So we're reinvesting in it, but it's all with sort of in the spirit of, this is such a beautiful valley and a beautiful place that's why we bought it, and that's why we want to invest in it. And so why are we putting this permit in? Blue Rock, in its current state. Oh, I should, by the way, one thing is, in addition to those things, we've also revitalized the vineyard, and thanks to my friend John here, who's really done incredible work as a neighbor to help us get that vineyard back going, and we've had our first harvest of grapes this year, so it's really exciting about that. But why are we putting this permit in? So Blue Rock is still not profitable. Part of that is that, you know, and you have a restaurant and an inn that really only do business 2 nights a week, roughly. You know, Fridays and Saturdays are when people come, and it's really also about 8 months of the year that you really see a lot of business. And it's good. We want the county to be quiet and so forth, but sort of at the scale of that, you know, 5 rooms as a B&B and a little restaurant like that, it's not enough to sort of support what we want to continue to do with the county. So what the intent of our permit is to be able to generate enough revenue that we can really continue to invest in the sustainment and beauty of this property and the valley that it sits in. We're very respectful of the idea that we're not trying to build the Salamander Resort or even the Inn of Little Washington. We want a small little country inn with a restaurant and the ability to do events on it. And that's really the intent of it. And these enhancements are with that in mind. We're very focused on sort of listening to what our neighbors said. We had a group of neighbors over to the inn I think in July, to tell them a little bit about our expansion plans and get some feedback and thoughts from them, and that was very helpful. And we definitely are trying to, any changes that we're trying to do with the idea of having it not be in the view shed, and if anything, enhance the sort of the beauty of that valley and so forth. So
that's really the intent, and I just wanted to sort of introduce myself, thank you guys, and tell us that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do, is just trying to make this a property that is sustainable, that can provide some jobs for people here in the counties and for working families in the counties, to provide a sustainable tax base, and not have a property that's not profitable enough that it can sustain itself. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowling. All right, I think I'll go ahead at this time and I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing on this special exception for the Blue Rock Inn to amend the Country Inn special exception 27 or 23-07-02. Anyone that wishes to speak on this application, now would be your opportunity to do so. Please raise your hand and approach the mic and address your comments to the commissioners. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Klaus Peters. I own the Foster Harris House. I purchased the Foster Harris House in January of 2017, and at that time, the draw was the Inn at Washington. And because of it, we have been doing pretty well since. But now, we have another place, and that's the Blue Rock. And it's all about quality. It's not just another inn or another restaurant. It is amazing, the quality. And what's happening now, before, people would stay one night because they eat at the inn, and the next day they would leave. Things have changed. Now people stay 2 and 3 nights because of the Blue Rock, because of patios. They're not just going to the inn. And the important thing is the quality. The ambience of the Blue Rock is amazing. The restaurant is fantastic. So that brings tremendous sense of quality to our little town. And I'm totally in favor that we do whatever Nick Dowling wants. His plans is because we know it's quality, because he has proven to be quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm John Government. I'm the owner of Government Vineyard. And as you might surmise, I'm in support of this project. I think I could echo everything that Mr. Peters said. It's a wonderful project that brings an enhanced customer base to the county. It's good for county revenues, taxes, and it enhances the overall ambiance of our scenic route here, 211. Everything that Mr. Dowling has done is absolutely top notch, with an eye to detail for quality, permanence, and low impact on the environment. So I'm fully in support of this project. Thank you.
Is there any other parties that wish to speak?
The neighbor, Lucianne Meyer, better known as Pud. I have no objection to some of the things, but I do have objection taking an agricultural district and there's nothing that supports agriculture. I, unfortunately, way back when the Blue Rock started, thought it was a good idea because they had vineyards, and then they were going to have a restaurant, and the grapes sort of supported the restaurant and vice versa. Well, that didn't last long. And then we've had several others back and forth. I don't think you should take what the zoning you have and completely ignore it. I mean, it was bought as an agriculture district, and there's not one thing that they've done to promote agriculture or in that type of district. And if you're going to expand what you have instead of building new and separating it into 3 or 4 different plots. That's counter to what we need to be doing. And I'm sure it's a great restaurant, and I'm sure they do everything well, and they have kept the down lighting and things like that. It's true. However, I'm just generally against breaking everything that an agricultural district is supposed to have.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Hello, my name is Mark Anderson. I'm from the Piedmont District, but I'm on the Blue Rock Farm property on an average of once a week, and I have been for the last 7 years because our family boards horses on that facility. I met and spoken with Mr. Dowling, of course, and I want to say a couple of complimentary things to start out, and it'll degenerate after that. Thanks for the warning. First of all, he has done an extraordinary job on the restaurant operation and on the guest house. I was told by experienced realtors that that guest house was a tear down. He refused to believe that, and at considerable expense and trouble, he restored it, and it's been an ideal neighbor, really. The horse barns are real close to the guest house, as you can see on that map, and there's never been a problem with anybody molesting the horses or making too much noise or anything like that. Second of all, as I hate to disagree with Ms. Meyer, but he did restore one agricultural use, which was the vineyard, which was worthless when he bought it, and now it's a going concern. So that's a good thing. That's agricultural. I'm going to recommend to you, or submit to you for your recommendation, that this commission approve the 3 additional cottages for guest accommodations and the rebuilding of the caretaker residence, which is in really dilapidated shape. I think the request to divide into 3 lots is premature for reasons I'll get to shortly. And I totally oppose the event/banquet facility of 200 additional people, because I don't think that's an agricultural use, and I don't think it's logically connected with the country inn operation. So that's my recommendation. Now, I've been in contact with David Connick, and as always, he has provided me copious notes, arguments, and everything else, but you don't want to hear all that, so I'm just going to boil it down to several points. He's a font of knowledge, but you have to sort of wade through the verbiage to figure out what the meat is. First comment he made was, we need a full site plan. You're trying to make this decision on a major use, a lot of which is commercial, based on a site concept plan. And there's a big difference. It doesn't show the septic drain fields, it doesn't show the well locations, it doesn't show the storm drainage system, which I think underneath the steeplechase track, that's that oblong shape in the upper right-hand corner, which is dilapidated and dysfunctional, and it floods all the time now. It does show the barns. Now, there's 2 features not on there that should be on there. One is there's an incipient wedding venue being considered for the area right by the barn. That is not in this application. He's already poured a 40 by 60 foot concrete pad, and he's had electricians looking at it. And he's advised people it will become a wedding venue, but it's not entirely his choice. This body has something to say about that. The second thing that's happened is he did improve the fencing, and the fencing was very dilapidated all around the steeplechase track, but he put in a new fence on the easterly or right-hand side that's in quite a ways from the boundary of the property. So the steeplechase track is too short now. It can't be used again in point-to-point races unless you can figure out a way to get gates and everything so you can get through that fence. Similarly, you're aware that the Rappahannock High School cross-country program has used that facility for at least the last 30 years. I don't know how old that team is, but they've had to rework their routes to accommodate the fencing and everything, and possibly a couple of gates can help that. But the real problem here is, as Ms. Meyer said pretty eloquently, you're in an agricultural zoning district. You're trying to put a bunch of commercial uses on top of it under this country inn rubric, if I can say rubric here. And some of it fits to me and some of it doesn't. Clearly, he needs additional rooms to make the operation a go. He needs a place for his caretaker manager to stay. But these other facilities for the banquets and everything are are gonna put a lot more use on the property, commercial use, really. He needs to consider, or you need to have included in the application, is 600 gallons a day of water really enough for 300 people? That's like one flush apiece, if they're here for 3 hours. What about traffic? How are they gonna get to and from the site? Are there gonna be roads added? This is why you need a fully engineered final site plan to make this up. What are the impacts on the existing septic drain fields? Do new ones need to be added? Does a community engineered type system need to be added? I do not know. And the final thing I'm going to point out too is when you need inspiration on how to decide what's a country end use and what's not, you have the collective wisdom of this commission, which is good. And you also have the comprehensive plan, which some of you slaved over for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Principle 7 was cited to in the staff report. I'm going to point you to Principle 1. The principle is encourage agricultural operations and ensure the preservation of the productivity, availability, and use of agricultural lands for continued production of agricultural products. Blue Rock Farm is a horse farm for training and coaching polo. So the product is more experienced polo players and better horses. That is going to be significantly diminished if the applicant gets everything he's asking for in this exception. The reason is, right now, about 60 acres of the property is usable for the Blue Rock Farm. If he gets everything he's asking for, it's going to be cut down to about 25 acres and therefore fewer horses. The 2 most important features for horse training are the steeplechase track, which is also a horse training track, and that odd-shaped thing at the lower right-hand corner, that's a polo arena. That's for arena polo. That arena costs several $100,000 to reproduce today. It's been used for U.S. Polo Association sanctioned events. It's been used for training on a regular basis. The soil inside of that is what they call blue stone. It's a light form of clay. It's the only way horses can ride in there. The concept plan that they have there shows parking for one of the facilities, I think it's the banquet facility, to take place inside of that arena. If you do that, you will compact down the bluestone to the point where it turns into concrete over time, and it won't be available to use for polo training or any other use for that arena. That is the only full-size polo arena within 30 miles of here. There's a couple tiny ones elsewhere in Rappahannock County, but that's the only official one. That is a farming use. And so, I just read you Principle 1. Policy 5 out of Principle 1 says, make land use decisions and plans that approve conversion of important farmland to non-farm use only if overriding public need exists to change that land use. Existing development areas cannot accommodate a proposed new use, or extenuating circumstances can be shown to exist. It says that. That's Principle 1. Clearly, I hope I have shown you that it is an important agricultural use of the property for the horse farm. It's unique to this county. Is there overwhelming public need to change that use? Not for the restaurant, not for the banquet facility, event facilities, whatever. Are there extenuating circumstances? Well, the brooms, yes, because he needs to make enough money to break even at least. But for this, I don't think he's made a showing in his application that there's any extenuating circumstances that apply here. So I recommend to the commission, when you do your deliberations, that you take the comprehensive plan into account, that you approve part of this application, and either disapprove or call for more information on the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Peggy Spilling-Cothman. I live at 77 Christmas Tree Lane, the property immediately to the, I guess it's north of the Blue Rock property. I agree with what Mr. Anderson has said. The Blue Rock is a beautiful property. He really has done wonderful things with it. It's something we can all be proud of. But I think he's pushing it too far here. We just, it's just too much. You've got the tools. If you want to keep this rural, you want to keep the rural nature, you've got the tools to do it. And I just hope that you'll use them.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this application this evening? All right. I do think that due to the complicated nature of this application, and I know from past applications on this property, there's been a lot of interest, and so I'm not going to close the public hearing at this time. Would you all like to speak to add anything to the comments that have been made so far, or would you like to hear what the commission has to say?
If I may, just a couple of comments, Madam Chair. Thank you for permitting me to go last. Just to address a few of the points that came up in the public comments, the commission heard about the comprehensive plan, and you were urged to consider that. Of course, this commission, one of your primary responsibilities is to consider any application that comes before you and in the light of the comprehensive plan. That's one of the duties that responsibilities that you're charged with carrying out. And so I'd like to just remind you of a few parts of the comprehensive plan to make the point of why this application, I believe, is quite consistent with the plan. Principle 7 of our plan urges the county to promote only economic growth that assists in maintaining our existing balance and is compatible with the environmental quality and rural character and does not adversely affect farm operations, forestry operations, residential neighborhoods, the tourist industry, and the county's fiscal stability. One of the policies that's expressed under that principle is number 4, which is to allow certain commercial development that by its nature must be located in sparsely populated areas, near agricultural operations, near existing neighborhoods, or on specific sites, to be so located if, and then there's a number of factors, if the development enhances the agricultural and tourist industries of the county. That's number 1. If the development does not impede traffic flow on roads and at intersections. If the development is not and does not initiate strip development, which creates traffic hazards and inefficient land use, but can be clustered now or in the future with other developments served by the controlled access and frontage roads. If the development does not overburden the county's water resources and does not require the transfer of water resources from other jurisdictions to sustain the development. If the development does not overburden waste disposal. If the development is adequately served by and does not overburden emergency services. And if the development does not create environmental degradations to soil, air, groundwater, or surface water. I would urge the Planning Commission members to review our application materials where we have addressed, I think, every one of these points under policy number 4, under principle 7. I had a member of the community express to me in a conversation earlier this week that they couldn't think of a location in this county that was probably more suited to a project like the Blue Rock in the form that it's outlined in your materials than this location here on a four-lane public highway, and as the materials make clear, addresses all of these points under principle 4. Another one of the policies under principle 7 is number 5. Which is that the Planning Commission should consider requests for redevelopment of existing commercial and industrial facilities only if it causes minimal detrimental effects to the area subject to the provisions of the county's zoning ordinance. That's one that I would like to address because this is, I think we're all probably familiar with the fact that Blue Rock has been operating to varying degrees of success in this location for upwards of 40 years now. As Ms. Summers mentioned in the opening staff report, the initial permit dates from the 1980s. And we probably are all familiar with the ups and downs of the Blue Rock in its history over the years. As Mr. Dowling expressed to you, one of the primary considerations that he had in taking on this project was, in addition of his love for the county and the community that he came to know out here, was to take this Blue Rock property and try and make it into something as good or better than what it was at the height of its days back years and years ago. So that's consistent with policy number 5 under principle 7. Principle 8, of course, the Planning Commission is well familiar with, is to protect the county's fiscal capabilities. I recall that when our board was grappling with the fiscal year 23-24 budget and balancing that, one of the key things that came out of those budget discussions and the debate was how are we going to generate revenues in this county to support the outlay of public monies that the budget required. And I distinctly recall, and I'm sure the chair will recall, that one of the ways of funding that was in the county's meals and lodgings tax. Your application materials gives you a figure of the meals and lodgings tax that was generated by the Blue Rock in its current scaled down condition in excess of $66,000 in tax revenue. And that's just tax revenue. That doesn't take into account the effect of the individuals that it employs. That doesn't take into account the fiscal effect of all of the other businesses in this county, and we mentioned a few of them in your application materials, that the Blue Rock also supports in its operations. So I would suggest that Principle 8 of our comp plan very much argues in favor of this kind of application. We also point out in the application materials that, and this directly speaks to this question of the zoning of the property. This property is zoned to the agriculture zoning district. It is literally within maybe not a stone's throw, but a baseball's throw of the commercial area, the general commercial area that everyone here, of course, is familiar with. Not within it, but very near it. A couple of those the goals and principles that are expressed in the comp plan's commercial area plan is to encourage and maintain a viable rural and agricultural economy compatible with the county's size and character. It's focused on the economy. One of the principles in the commercial area plan urges the Planning Commission and Board to account for the allowance for economic growth that is compatible with the environmental quality and rural character and does not adversely affect farm operations, etc. That's the same principle that you heard earlier in Principle 7. One other factor that the Planning Commission, I would say, should consider in the commercial area plan, which again is right to the east of this property, is it talks about its purpose. And the purpose of the commercial area plan, in part, is to increase awareness among the development community, citizens, and county officials of such characteristics as site organization, building height, massing and scale, construction materials, and the pedestrian environment, which can result in the enhancement of the architecture and site development of the county's commercial areas. Then it goes on to say that the intent of the Rappahannock Commercial Area Plan is not to restrict innovation, imagination, or variety, but rather to promote design principles that provide a better sense of transition from and balance with the intrinsic characteristics of non-commercial areas. I submit to the planning commissioners that this property, if permitted and allowed to operate in the manner that it's proposed, is exactly what this purpose is calling out in the commercial area plan. The idea of transitioning from the commercial uses that dot that general commercial area that are just to the east of it, the co-op and Baldwin's and the small engine place and those kinds of places. And then Ms. Meyer's Farm, which is just to the west of this property. This property, if operated on the scale and with the sensitivity to the environment that the applicant proposes, is exactly that transition that the commercial area plan, part of our comprehensive plan, has in mind when that was drafted. Just a couple of other comments. One of the public speakers noted again that this is ag, and talked about that this is this commercial use in ag zoning. I would urge the commissioners to bear in mind that what you have in your materials shows that a very large proportion of this property is and will be an operating vineyard. That's reflected on the site concept plan. Also, there is a horseback riding barn. There is boarding. There is horseback riding. It is in the upper left-hand corner, and then the trails go around the property. That's going to continue to be operated on this property. In fact, the additional land that would be occupied by the expanded buildings for the rooms and the buffet banquet area is probably less than 10% of the total area of the property that's in agricultural use right now. That's not going to change. One of the public speakers criticized the lack of a full-blown site plan. Our ordinance does not require that at this point the applicant submit a full-blown site plan. And Ms. Summers, as zoning administrator, deemed this application complete based upon the site concept plan that you have in your materials. Probably most of you are aware that a full-blown engineered site plan on the scope and scale that will be required ultimately and will be required to be submitted and approved by the zoning department is something that costs tens of thousands of dollars. And I think the very reason why our zoning ordinance doesn't require an applicant to come in with a full site plan at the beginning of this process is that kind of expense, economic expense, would act as a tremendous bar to many applicants that simply couldn't afford it and would never even attempt to bring on an application if they were told by the zoning department, oh, you have to have a full-blown engineered site plan before we can even consider your application.
Did you want to hear from the commissioners?
I'm sorry?
Did you want to hear from the commissioners?
Sure.
I just think you might want to circle back
Okay.
one more time,
All
and
right.
I do want to give you that opportunity.
All right, then I'll reserve the rest of my comments for the commission.
I think that maybe it would be productive if we could
Thank
hear
you.
everything and you could address
Thank you.
concerns all at one pass. Mr. Henry, this is
Sure.
in your
Yeah.
district.
Yeah, get started.
If you'd prefer to.
I'll get started with food for thought, since we're talking food. How many acres of grapes are there?
Right now, 2, but we can expand it up to 9.
To somebody in Rappahannock going to Mr. Montague Crest.
Yep, primarily the Blue Rock and whatever they don't use, I'll purchase.
Just for a little history here, when I first came to the county in 1980, this property was owned by the Swift family, I believe, and they had a big barn out there that had burned under mysterious conditions, and it was all kind of a mystery. And I was a loan officer at the time, and I had an opportunity to visit the property different times for different reasons. And, you know, that property was in a very dilapidated state of repair. The house was really almost unlivable at that time. And, you know, in 43 years since then, it has done nothing but climb from that low level of condition to to something that's attractive today. So over this whole period of time, I think that property has been improved and gotten better. And back at that time, I think there was some cows running on it, but the fences were pretty bad, and it was all dilapidated, and it's gotten better. And a couple questions related to your site plan here. What was going to be the access to that parcel 3 rear, the 5-acre lot? Was that going to be by the other entrance that went up to the stables? And was that going to hook around? This concept plan doesn't show that.
Is parcel 3 the one on the north side, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, that was going to be
Get my,
up in the corner.
Yeah, there are 2 options for access in the final, on the final subdivision plan if the board approves that. One is to actually extend the access across the property, but the other is to use, I guess that's Christmas Tree Lane. This property does front on Christmas Tree Lane and would have the right to use that right of way for access to that.
There's an existing gate.
Yeah, Mr. Dowling mentions there's actually an existing gate there.
And your title work shows that they have a right to use Christmas Tree.
Christmas Tree Lane was created and dedicated on the plat when the was it Resource Development Company, I think, was the developer of that property back when it was the 300-acre parcel. So this property would also have that ability to go out that way.
Yeah. The proposed facility for 200 people, what's your concept of the approximate dimensions of that?
I'm sorry?
You have the dimensions of the...
I'm sorry, the dimensions of the structure itself?
The proposed banquet facility, what we're talking about?
We have it, we can get it for him, if he has it handy.
I don't have the actual plan for that itself. Is that 729 square feet? I just didn't bring that part of the file that has the dimensions of that structure itself. It's not showing.
So tell me about that build. What's your concept of what it's going to look like on the inside? Is it going to be completely enclosed? Is it going to be open? Tell me about it.
Yeah, first it's going to resemble a barn. It's going to resemble a sort of a very nice upscale country barn. It's going to have an opening with sort of doors that can open on one side facing the mountains with a little sort of porch area off of it, so that certainly when the weather's good it can be open, and then also can be closed if the weather's not good. It's going to have a little entrance with a little cover so that people can enter and access that, and that's pretty much it. A little cupola on the top. We have a little rendering we can send you, but very much designed to look and have the feel of an agricultural building.
So you're thinking metal roof, wood siding, something like that? This is what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 1 story?
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably be more like 1.5 stories, because it's like a barn, it'll have a tall roof, but 1 story. 1.5 stories, I would call it.
And it's going to be conditioned, it could be insulated, conditioned for year-round use?
Yes.
Okay. And you got...
I don't know if it'll have heat, but it'll have air conditioning. Conditioning that.
Yeah. So your kitchen area is going to be a warming kitchen where food's going to be prepped, I guess, in the restaurant and taken up there and warmed if it needs to be.
Right. Current intent of the permit is to do that, yeah.
It's going to have indoor bathrooms in there too.
Correct.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, why was the proposed caretaker's house in this facility held so much to the east side of the property and not more towards the middle?
So the primary, two reasons. One is that we really wanted to preserve the view shed for our many neighbors that are sort of up higher on the ridge looking across that valley as much as possible. And along that east side of the property, you can, if we expand up a little bit, you know, there's essentially a big line of trees along there, And you don't really have any neighboring houses sort of looking out at that. So we would be building in a place where we really are doing minimal impact on the view shed. And then secondly, there's a little rise on that. The ridge starts there, so it puts buildings up a little bit on the higher ground so that they have a nice view across the pond, the vineyard, and the mountains. So it works, it's a win-win.
Okay. The middle, if we could take that and scoot over towards the property itself, I guess go to your left, Michelle. So the middle of the property itself, there's a pond there behind behind the restaurant there. I'm getting this veterinarian practice in the. We off a little bit there. We're off a little bit. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically behind your the main Blue Rock, it seems like that from that picture there looks like hay has been made there in that picture. Is that some of the better land on the property in the middle of the farm below?
Sort of right in the center of the property?
Yeah.
Well, that's right now being used and will continue to be used for horse grazing. That's the intent, is to continue the use of that center of the property for the horses. And also, it's beautiful view shed for all of our neighbors above higher on the ridge to look down across that field and see horses.
Yeah. It seems that, horses, people talk about horses, and, they're nice to bite grass, but they're really not food or fiber. And when I was an agricultural lender, we never considered horses to be an agricultural commodity because it wasn't food and fiber. So people talk about horses, but, they're not really, I don't know, not too many people, maybe some Europeans might decide that horse is tasty. So, not to say, but what you should do, but with the restaurant that you're doing, the wonderful restaurant and the things you're doing out there, it seems like you have a very rare opportunity to develop into a farm-to-table restaurant where you could devote 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 acres of your property to vegetables and would have something there that people talk about, but very few restaurants end up achieving it. And I know that's good soil back there, but it'd be a way to get rid of those nasty horses. I think it's something that everybody in Rappahannock County could enjoy. We wouldn't have your tenants talking bad about you too. So that's something you might want to consider. Backing up to this property, we have this ordinance, and we recognize that the reason we have this ordinance is that we recognize that not every property in Rappahannock County can support something like this. And there's been very few instances where uses have been expanded on properties to allow, we want to call it commercial uses, more consumer uses, and particularly down at Castleton. We allowed the music festivals down there, and all the rentals down there, facilities to be built, all this stuff, theater. And that's miles off of 211, and that's worked out wonderful down there for years, and it's been an attraction for Rappahannock. And this property here on the dual lane highway between Sperryville and Little Washington, with fire and rescue departments in each village 2 or 3 miles away, close to the commercial area. You've got a 30, 40-year track record of this property where there's been no congestion, no problems there. There's been horse events there. You're across the street from the high school, close to the Flatwood Refuge Center. If there's any place that this should work, this can work, it should be here. I mean, you've got, it's been tested for 40 years. It's got good soils. It's got everything going for it that says that if it's any place in Rappahannock County that this should go, it's probably at this location. So I kind of like what's going on. I think that with this use, though, that maybe there should be some more open space, and I'm okay with the 10-acre lot, but I don't think maybe parcel 3 is appropriate at this time. So that's my one kind of hang-up on the application, is the creation of that third parcel. And going back to Mr. Brown, I guess, Mr. Brown, you did a title search on this and did the determination of the density and the division rights that this property still has.
Yes, sir. That's in your material.
That's in our material, yeah, I just want to go over that.
Yeah.
But you went back to the beginning of what year to do that?
The original 300-plus acre property, unfortunately, there's no date on the surveyor's report. Let's see.
1973, I think is what you have.
But my letter talks about starting in 1973, although I'll tell you, Mr. Henry, this, and you look at your materials, that's the original plat of the 307.5 acre farm. Now that plat was done well before 1973. It doesn't, this is the copy that came out of the land record, so, and it doesn't have the surveyor's seal on, so I don't know what the actual date of that plat is. Well before 1973.
And your analysis of this, you took into the prior divisions of the property, the TOCO and all these things to come up with the property having the allowed density that you're proposing to be produced now.
Yes, sir. I mean, if you think about the original 300-plus acre property, as I got down there to the end, there would potentially be 5 cuts still remaining on that parent tract. Now, this property only has 79 plus acres, so obviously there can't be 5 cuts on this 79 acre property.
Well, Mr. Brown, not that I encourage you to look, but there's been a precedent where people have used up other people's density and it's been approved by the zoning administrator previously.
Mr. Dowling doesn't want to be a pig, so
Right.
he's not proposing to do that.
The previous practice was first come, first served, and that hasn't changed yet in the ordinance, but I hope it does change. So that's all the comments I have.
Mr. Elby?
Thank you. I appreciate that analysis and observations from my colleague. I want to go back to the water and the roads, and I appreciate the comments about the site plan and how an engineered site plan is not called for here, but I do think the site concept plan leaves a few things to be desired in terms of location of roads and access, and at least footprint of the location of buildings and shading. To me, and the question of water adequacy is another thing that I think has been touched on, but is still a concern of mine in terms of accepting this. But I will agree with Mr. Henry in that this property does seem to have a lot going for it to desire this, but I do think we need to proceed carefully, and I am also receptive to the public comments about the fact that the banquet and event facility may be a bit of an outlier in terms of the intensity and the sort of relationship to the agricultural use. So those are my sort of observations and thoughts at this stage, but I would like to understand better the, I have not really studied what our requirements are. I believe it's within our right to ask for some more details on the site concept plan, short of requesting an engineered site plan. So I personally would like to see more clear indication of proposed road and access points, well and septic and building locations, along with at least conceptually what the kind of visual buffers and concepts for some of the things you were describing earlier about how you intend to maintain the kind of rural character. It sounds like you have that concept. I just don't feel like it's fully fleshed out for our purposes here, and I'm a little uncomfortable with we'll figure this out as we go. I mean, this property, one thing about this property we've all observed is it has sort of morphed incrementally, and that makes a lot of sense, but it also does give us a pattern of kind of unpredictability about where this is ultimately heading, and I personally would like to have that a little clearer in my mind before rendering an opinion or recommendation on this. That's all I have for now.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes, I have a little bit more history, I guess, back in the years, as I'd say, I go back to the late 50s and 60s when this property was owned by the Greenways. And I was a classmate of the son and the daughter. It was John Greenway and Lee Greenway. And it was operated then as a horse farm. If I'm not wrong, I think they even had some point-to-point races at one time. I think that was the way it was. And like everything else, I believe that, and I have no solid facts that I can say, but I believe that the reason the Greenways sold the property because it was not profitable. They couldn't make it on the farm side. And I'm just going to say one thing about farming here. I'd like to see as much land kept in the farming as could possibly be, but it's not profitable, people. There comes a time when the farmland has to go to something else to make it profitable. I'm just a little small farmer, and I'll tell you up front, I could not have quit my day job and live off the farm. Like I said, I'm just a little small farmer, but I sympathize with the farmers in this county, in this country. It's not the money maker that a lot of people sets back and seem to think. It's not. It's a life that you want to get into, and you either love it or you get out of it. So I can understand why people has to get out of the farm, and as a result, you're going to have some changing in the agriculture. And personally, I think this applicant has not really changed a whole lot in what he's doing. I think that he's still trying to keep some agriculture in the vineyard. I've seen that. I drove up that lane, and that is one of the best looking vineyards in this county. Now, also, I do recall that they used to have weddings at this vineyard, because I have attended weddings on this site. And this pond that you talked about, the wedding was held on the hill. You had the pond down below, and these real big swans on the pond. It was a beautiful sight. It was a beautiful, beautiful location for outdoor weddings there. So, I do have a concern about the water usage. I don't know, I would like to see something more precise about this usage of 600 gallons. Because I have a concern for the surrounding neighbors, and I know you don't have neighbors right up on top of you. But I have a concern if down the road, if your usage was to increase, to take away from those neighbors. And to keep that amendment down. So I would like to see something I don't know if you would say it's a hydraulic study or something, but I'd like to see something more precise that we could really hang our head on, that you're not gonna damage other people's waterway.
Their what? I'm sorry.
The wells.
Okay.
But other than that, I'd say this is a beautiful site. I think as Mr. Henry said, I don't think you could find a better site in this county for what you're doing. And I think personally, from what I've seen, what I've heard, you're running a class outfit. But there is one, I do have to make one more comment. Your polo field. What's your plans for that? I think somebody said something about parking in it or whatever, but is that what it's going to do?
Right, I'm gonna address that now. We're not sure what we wanna do with the polo arena. It's in a kind of dilapidated state right now, although it's still usable. I know that folks use it. I would love to be able to fix it up and bring equestrian events back to that polo field, or at least, make it look a little nicer than it does. We did show, I think you can see that we saw it as a potential additional overflow parking area. It wouldn't be something that would get parking on it on any regular basis, but in the event that there was a need for overflow parking, there are other options for us to do parking as well, but we saw that as one possible. Mr. Anderson raised the question of whether or not the parking would damage the polo field, and certainly that would be something that we would look into, make sure that we didn't do that. But we have not made a decision on the future of the polo field, but right now it's still used from time to time for training and things like that.
I would just make a suggestion about that. Aesthetically, right now, when you drive by, it looks to be dilapidated, run down, especially those round your fences. I don't know, some kind of vines or whatever. It sort of looks, I would suggest do something to just kind of improve the look of it.
We would love to do that, and there are other things on the property that we would love to be able to improve.
And I know
we need some revenue to help us do it.
Right, I know it takes time. But that's all I have to say about it. And like I said, I think that's got a beautiful site there.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Mr. Sis?
Most everything has been addressed by Mr. Henry and Mr. Lake, but do you know offhand how many wells you have on the property?
I don't.
There are two.
Well, now, full disclosure, I've used Mr. Brown's expertise in these matters, so I paid him fiat currency for that. So I'm going to ask him to explain on page, I think it's 18 of the initial request where the tax maps are. It basically says 1973, the property tract, 307.5 acres. And you have it broken down where it says the surveyor recorded deed book, indicates the total number of divisions on the 307 acre parent tract should nominally not exceed 11. In layman's terms, Mr. Brown, help me out here. I'm counting 11 right there now. And I see one or two of them says does not count against the total. The tax map 2848, 2848A, 2848B, 2848C. You have them all broken down, but I count 11 there.
Yes, sir.
So just in layman's terms for me, because you've explained this to me before on other things, how is the 11, the original 11, and if you're looking to add 3 more or 2 more, not fall into that?
Several of them just simply don't count as cuts under the subdivision ordinance.
Okay.
So if you look at the summary for each one of them, we point out whether they count as a cut or not. For example, that 2848B, I'll use that as an example.
Does not count as total.
Yeah, that was an overlap boundary line adjustment area. So it got assigned a tax map number by the commissioner back in the day. but it was actually boundary adjusted into an adjoining property.
Okay,
So it's,
so you don't pay taxes on that piece of property, do you?
right, well, these are all the, I mean, this is a summary of all the different
yeah,
tax
okay.
map parcels
Yeah, I
that
just-
came
yeah, I'm
out
just
of
trying
the
to-
original, right.
I'm just trying to get it down so I understand it completely.
Right.
And then the,
Right.
cut to, boom, 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 and then you put,
Yeah.
so you want to do an additional 2 from the one that's already, that he already has. We're looking to take the 79 and then break it up.
Looking strictly at its acreage, which is 79 acres, and applying our 1 per 25 acre density requirements. Again, as Mr. Henry pointed out, because you go back and look at the larger tract, theoretically, this property owner could actually take in a couple of other cuts that are still out there available to it, but that's not what the proposal is. So just sort of being laser focused on the 79 acres, you would ordinarily only have enough density there for 3 parcels total, two cuts and a resident, and that's all that Mr. Dowling is proposing to do.
All right. That answers that question. You said 1 to 2 events per week, and roughly the duration of those, I mean, they're 1 day or 3 hours, I guess, based on the...
Like 3 hours or so.
So you could have 200 people at the one event, 100 people at the hotel or the restaurant piece, and then if Rappahannock's, having a state trial or something, in theory, you could have a lot of cars there. Okay.
We might have to deconflict some of all.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said all outdoor music will stop by 10 p.m., and it's a 3-hour limit on each event. Is that just if you start, you're saying you're not going to start it until 7 and then go to 10, or they can start at 4, but you're close it at 7, or I'm just getting confused on the whole.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to what the
Just 1 to 2 a week.
proposal puts in as to what we thought was sufficient.
And they addressed the hydrological study and then the road, some of the site plans are very, very expensive, but thank you, Mr. Brown, you explained what I needed in my turn, so I'm good.
Ms. Ritter?
Maybe I don't understand this, but 25-acre zoning seems to me to be 25-acre zoning. If this is agricultural land, it's 25-acre zoning. Let's say I know somebody's selling 150 acres. I want to buy 25 acres. Somebody else buys 125. The original 150 acres gets 6 25-acre lots. The guy who buys 125 acres only wants 1, he's only going to construct 1 building. That does not mean that I have 5 opportunities for 5 5-acre lots on my 25 acres. How do you figure that?
The minimum parcel size, Ms. Ritter, is, in agricultural zoning, is 2-acre lots. And one of the things that people often overlook in our subdivision ordinance, because it's almost never used, is that we actually do recognize the idea of clustering. So you take your hypothetical 150-acre farm, and assuming that it's got good road frontage and it doesn't lose any density for steep slopes or floodplains. So it's a nice billiard table flat piece of land. That potentially can have 6 parcels total. And if that property owner wanted to create 5 2-acre lots and leave 140-acre residue, they'd be able to do that under our zoning and subdivision.
Yeah, but that's not what's happening here. You have 2 separate, it's not cluster at all. In fact, if it were a cluster, you'd put it next to the hotel. Instead, he's putting it in the agricultural land.
I think cluster is the wrong term to use. I think you use the word, better to use density is a better term to use. And basically, he's got the 76 acres here, and it's pretty much a flat piece of property. He doesn't lose anything to topo, floodplain here, and he's got 3 division rights. And those 3 lots can be any size he wants down to 2 acres, any place he wants it on the ag land.
Then what's the meaning of 25 acres?
It's a density, you get density, it's one lot for 25 acres, or one house.
Get to 3.
Right, yeah, yeah,
But it's
but
not
you
a
don't, it's
25
not a
acre
requirement of
lot.
being 25 acres. There's a particular property in the county that will go unnamed, but it's in the Amosville area. And it was a very large property to begin with, and it started out being large lots. Well, a particular person found out about this density thing, and then went in and used all the density to create 5-acre lots on his property. And it was done, 15 years go by, and it was a property owner who was the second person that bought, and he had 100 or 150 acre tract, and he wanted to create a family division for himself or for his son or somebody. Went into zone and found out he had no division rights. And the first day he bought it, it was a perfect piece of land, and he had 5. And 20 years later, when he walks in, he has none. And that's, it's been the business of first come, first served. So you can actually use up, technically, somebody else's perceived division rights of the original parent tract. So that's why it was said that there's a total of 5 here left on the whole property.
5 cuts now.
That he could use. He could come in and ask for 5 division rights here and be perfectly permissible under the way it's been done, grandfathered. But he's not. He's just looking at his 70-some acres and saying, I've got 3. But he could be asking for 5. It's a loophole that exists.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
But creating non-conforming lots also has some other restrictions that.
What's a non-conforming lot here? It's not a non-conforming lot.
These would be conforming.
Well, but there's some provision, and, it's a rabbit hole, but there is another level of review if you're creating lots, that, so they would be conforming if they're within the minimum lot size. I guess only if they're not conforming.
They have to meet the bulk requirements, which are, frontage on the road and so forth. But other than that, there's no limitation on it. What you may be thinking of, Mr. Light, is that when you do a subdivision where you're going to create 4 or more lots, that does trigger some additional requirements under our subdivision ordinance, a 50-foot wide right-of-way, for example, and a couple of other things.
But so is the reason you're putting these in lots is there are parcels because you're going to sell them off eventually?
We want the ability to do that, but also all the property rights of a house having its own property rather than, be condoized into sort of, a bigger property. So we have a separate farmhouse now, and we would like to put, one other property up in that, northeast corner. And it just makes sense for everybody to have their own land, and for all the reasons explained, since we have it made sense to be able to do those cuts. That's what we proposed.
I've never talked to you before tonight, when we met here, but also, you're not a wealthy man, you didn't pay cash for this place, right?
I did not pay cash for this place.
So, one benefit that, of course, you'll have is that if you ever want to get more normal financing than a commercial rate, you got a house in 10 acres that would qualify for a residential loan. The rear property, if you was to get that, and put your house in, you could get a normal conventional residential loan, whereas now you've got one crazy commercial loan that probably has a refix date on it, and you play Russian roulette every 3 to 5 years with the lender someplace. Maybe is that pretty good?
Absolutely. The ability to sell it, the ability to finance it, everything one can do by having one's own property are the advantages of that.
Can I pick up on that? I didn't quite catch that the 3 main tourist home dwellings would be actually constructed in the manner of a single-family home. Will they have kitchen and, that's another part of the vision. I don't think that has been evident.
Not you mean the buildings that will contain the rooms, the guest rooms?
Yes.
No, those are just going to have guest rooms and so on.
Well, then So they wouldn't be separable.
You got the 10-acre lot that has the house on it.
Okay, so that's the one.
Yeah,
that
that's
there is a
normal.
house.
That's normal.
And what about the one in the front? Does that have a house?
The one on the right-hand corner,
It
that's
has
not
the
in the
tourist
front,
home.
that's in the back.
Oh, that's in the back.
Yeah.
But that has a house, so
Proposed.
each parcel would have a single-family home type structure on it in this configuration. Is that
The
true?
tourist home on the one parcel already exists, so that would, you know,
That's the
used
existing
that.
one, that's why that's a separate.
And then essentially the dwelling, the caretaker owner dwelling that we've talked about, and
That's
that
the
would
one.
be
That's
the
the
one.
new
yeah,
one that you're
on-
putting in the
on
back.
main.
And that would also serve as a tourist home?
I'm sorry.
What would be the use of that building?
Just for the manager, for me to use, just no tourist home use is being sought.
And the staff report recommends a condition that makes it clear that that's not to be used for guest accommodation.
So it takes the manager away from the main accommodations?
I'm sorry.
It removes the manager to some extent from the main accommodations.
They'll be on the same parcel.
Right, but they won't be in the same, immediately next to the same building, like they are now.
The building would be farther away from the inn, like,
Yeah.
but it'd still be a 2-minute walk instead of a 1-minute walk, I guess.
So the additional sleeping rooms, can you show us where they are on the concept, please?
You want me to put the, like,
Or just, are they sort of around the existing building? And I don't mean to step on anyone else's time. It's also up here if that's easier.
So the, I don't know if this helps, but the 3 buildings that are right close to the inn building now, I don't know if you can see the 3, and they show a swimming pool sort of in between them. Those would be where the new inn rooms would go. So roughly 5 rooms in each of those little buildings, and these would be, you know, designed to look again very agricultural, fit in with the rest of the architecture and setting. And this is all, everything you see here is part of what would be the inn parcel. The other 2 parcels would just have single-family properties on them, including the existing tourist home, and then proposed additional property on the other one. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And there's not a condition for a manager on site on the same parcel as a condition of the original permit?
Sorry, so the caretaker's home would be on the same parcel as well. You have to zoom out a little bit to see where we put
So what's
that.
on parcel 3?
But it's up, you see where it says the orange cottage up on the top there?
Oh, okay.
That's where that goes, and then parcel 3 would be the other parcel there. So the caretaker owner's cottage is there, next, kind of reasonably close to the proposed event facility.
And then what's on parcel 3?
And that would be a separate single-family property.
And there's no commercial, semi-commercial use, there's no tourist home associated with that, it's a private residence from Christmas Tree Lane.
It doesn't exist right now.
Doesn't exist
Right,
now.
but if it were to happen, that would be what it would be and where it would be accessed from.
We haven't asked for it, but we haven't, we might want to use it as a tourist, but we haven't, that's not part of the, I don't think it's part of the application for it.
And that would be served by Christmas Tree Lane or the same access as the caretaker house?
It could be off of Christmas Tree, or it could be a continuation of the driveway that connects, you know, up to the main Blue Rock driveway. Could go either way. I think what makes a little more sense, less driveway, would be to connect Christmas Tree Lane and the existing gate that's
Yeah,
there.
but those poor guys on Christmas Tree Lane are just getting zapped with all the traffic.
Yeah, we get a lot of concerns through that area, Christmas Tree Lane and Clark Lane, and that whole sort of area through there.
Right. Well,
And then, I
Because there's none
hesitate to call it
commercial
development,
activity.
but there's a lot of use of those
No.
small lanes in that area.
Understand completely. I think that the 2 points I'd make on that is this is 2 additional homes that would be used probably, you know, occasionally and primarily on weekends by, you know, 1 or 2 cars each house. And I think a lot of the concern on Christmas Tree relates to the event the wineries and other things that are bringing larger crowds of Christmas tree. We're not proposing any sort of commercial activity that's going to create traffic on Christmas trees. So these are just going to be single-family properties off of that would access if we chose to do it through Christmas tree, and we're allowed to do so. And one additional thing is, of course, if we were accessing Christmas tree, we would help with the cost to offset the cost of maintaining Christmas tree lane. So I would argue that for the folks who live off Christmas tree, the additional traffic would be minimal, but you're also getting additional bill payer to help maintain the road.
If I may, this to me is where the idea of, well, I'm not proposing this, but I think it's incumbent on us to consider these scenarios and talk about what we would find acceptable or what kind of conditions we would put on, because this is precisely where the sort of dynamic nature of this, I think, proposes some risks to our intentions being realized.
I think we're doing a real good job of flushing things out. And I think, Madam Chairman, we just keep on asking questions like we have been. I think we're flushing a lot of things out.
It is, we are. And I mean, it's sort of like a follow the bouncing ball application, so I appreciate everyone bearing with us as we work through our questions. Ms. Ritter, did you have any other questions?
I didn't, no.
Mr. Schuler?
I don't. I just had that same concern, I think, as the others about the water usage there. It just seemed awfully low, 600 gallons. Kind of makes me a little nervous.
So let me ask you a couple of questions here. Tell me about the guest houses, the guest cottages. Tell me what you envision there. Tell me more about that.
You mean the additional rooms?
Yeah, the additional rooms.
Yeah. So these would, the design would again be sort of in an agricultural farmhouse style, so to fit in with the rest of the inn and the work that we have there, and to fit in with the property in the area. And you'd have, most of the square footage would be dedicated to the hotel rooms, but they'll,
How many rooms, how many people are going to be in each building? Is this one of
so
them?
5 rooms in each, I don't think so.
5 rooms in each
5
building?
rooms in each building.
5 rooms in each building. Is that bedrooms? How's that breaking down? 2 bedrooms? How's that?
Two, maximum of 2 occupancy, that's what our ordinance permits.
So you're gonna have 5 rooms, 2 people in there overnight, 1 bath.
Right.
Okay. And what's your estimated square footage of these 5 rooms? Is it 600, 700?
I'd say 600, 700 square feet.
So, this polo field you have down, this arena, I mean, that's yours, and basically that's an agricultural item that you can do whatever you want to with it. And, whether it costs $300,000 to build and whether it has precious blue dust in it, I think your concept of using that for a parking area is probably very good because it's been compacted and conditioned and all this. That can considerable expense that would make a good parking area there and easily screened from to 11. So, and to maintain that, to maintain that wood structure would be a tremendous cost, on an ongoing basis. So, it's free for you to do whatever you want with it. It seems like the pro facilities I've seen around, this is how they end up after some years because everybody likes to play them, but nobody likes to share the cost of maintaining them. So, now, touching on this water usage, so you have a well up in the new house, the one you fixed out.
The tourist home.
Tourist home.
Yeah.
You got a well there?
Yes.
That's right.
And down at your restaurant, got 1 well there, 2 wells?
I think so. As I said, I didn't come to the hearing prepared to know exactly what.
Yeah. So, on any night, what's a good night of usage in the week? How many people can you run through your restaurant during the week, one night?
Yeah,
2 sittings?
right now the restaurant I think probably has most about 50 guests in it.
Okay.
Now you might have some turnover of tables, so maybe total of the course of the night it could be 75 to 100, but it's not a huge number. And then you got some in guests. Of course, the property's had bigger events in the past where people have done it. But just on the, if I can maybe expand the answer a little bit and also address some of Mr. Light's questions about it. We did look pretty extensively at the septic issues a while back when we were first doing the plans for the banquet hall, the event facility. And we identified the septic field with a professional engineer. They did all the drilling and everything. They also identified other available septic appropriate soil on the property that could support the additional rooms. So we're confident that there's room for septics, and of course, as Mike said, when we apply for any building permits, you're going to have your septic plan there. So all the engineering required to actually get anything built would have to be provided. As Mike said, we're not providing it all in this initial zoning thing, but we would certainly have to do that, and we've done it for septic. On the water, I think absolutely the same thing. We would have to demonstrate the ability to do the water, and also make sure, certainly we're happy to make sure that it doesn't affect the water table of neighboring properties as well.
So have you ever had water problems at the restaurant?
No.
So you've got the high school basically across the road that I don't know, how many students they have? 500?
Not that many, I don't think,
400?
400.
Yeah, so you got them, and you got the uses down below it, and then, I don't know where the elementary school, what aquifer that they fit in, but, you know, there hasn't been any history of water problems in that area. There's been no comments, no issues with water for the school. And with his site size, I mean, he's got 70 acres that, you know, if the right side is, well goes bad, he can move, you know, 200 yards to another location. So from a water standpoint, he's got a ton of acreage there to move around on. So, I mean, it's not like he's confined to a 2-acre lot in Sperryville where, you know, that's all he's got. So he's got plenty of opportunity there for, you know, if he runs into water issues. And, you know, this event center that you're doing, you know, 200 people for 3 hours, they're going to use some water, but it's not going to be like a killer. The same way with these rooms.
And we mentioned in materials that Blue Rock already ships most of its laundering out, has it done by a third party, and that's not done on site. And again, when you start talking about hotels, that's one of the, you know, that's one of the areas where you get into a lot of water usage if they're doing all of their laundering, you know, on site, and that's not been the case with Blue
But it could change. I mean, I also wonder about the water usage. I just think the number's very low, and I wondered if in the consideration of the event space as a warming kitchen, that the Department of Health considered that the primary food preparation sounds like it's actually going to be the restaurant, and perhaps didn't compound the number accordingly to account for the meals being prepared in the restaurant and being served in the event barn, because I just think that number's too low, and I can't figure out how they got there. And that's the only way I can get my head around it, is that in saying that it's for catering only, they didn't anticipate that the restaurant is the caterer.
But
Can I just address that?
Water, I mean, food prep takes some water, but if your dishes, the cleanup afterwards, if that's done up there or down here, if that plays into it, or if it's disposable stuff that's being taken up and used, you know, that comes into play also.
I don't think they're using disposable stuff out of you. I would be surprised. I mean, I think, I just think that the number was too low. I couldn't get my head around how they came to those numbers. I wondered what that was, and I have to say, I agree with the traffic concerns through the area. As a parent of a high school student for a number of years, thankfully he's driving himself now. That's a nice place to get to. It is a very congested area at different times, in the morning and in the afternoon. And during sporting events, there can be a lot of people entering and exiting that school property in a very short order of time, and not necessarily in a predictable manner if there are events around the high school. And 1 to 2 events per week throughout the whole year, up to 200 people is possibly a lot of intensity of use. And so to have in that very small corridor of 211, all of the high school exiting and then a special event exiting at the same time, I have a hard time that believing that VDOT took that into full consideration when a full exiting of a high school event warrants a deputy on site to have people exit in a safe manner. I think that the possibility of those two streams of traffic conflicting is very real, and I would like to know if VDOT took that into consideration.
Is there a crossover there? I can't exactly remember where the crossover lines up.
It might not be right across from the high school, but it's in that same stretch of 211.
So does everybody coming out of do they have to turn right, everybody?
Everybody has to turn right, yeah, so away from high school.
So that solves the problem of congestion. We gotta turn right.
Well, but there's people coming out that go across the divided highway and turn left.
That's right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people, I'm one of those people. So, there's a lot of people, you know, if you go out there this Friday, you wanna see what it looks like when there's a lot of people through there. Homecoming is Friday night, and there will be a lot of people in that stretch of 211 all at one time. And if you think of adding possibly as many as 150 additional cars through that stretch of 211 in that same time period, as a football game letting out and an event letting out, I have a hard time believing that the VDOT would think that that's a good idea. I have a hard time believing that the sheriff's department would need to have folks on site to assist even more than they do now. There would be probably 2 points where folks are directed through the highway. You know, I read this application prior to our last meeting where you all had a delay. And then we had this meeting with the Berkeley group to discuss minor versus major site plans and what those possibilities could mean for us in the future. And I just wonder, Michelle, what are our abilities to request a site plan at this time?
Typically, a site plan is not, a full engineer site plan is not needed until we actually get to the permit stage, like new construction or anything like that that will go on. I definitely think at this point that their concept plan, you can ask for more detail in it, absolutely, but also the cost between, you know, more detail to a concept plan and a full engineer plan, you know, that's a huge amount of money to invest in something that's just an application.
And it's impossible to design the site plan if you don't know what's been permitted. I mean, the site plan's based on ultimately what, if you've been successful in your permit application, ultimately what's been permitted by the board. And then the engineer, the site plan drills down on those features. So, you know.
Pick up on this.
Sure.
I think we're gonna get stuck just going back and forth between site plan and concept. We, as the planning commission and ultimately the decision body, are to look at traffic and safety and water use and environmental. And we're not asking for an engineered site plan in order to do that. We are asking for the information to be included on the concept plan that we feel we need to reach a point of support or, you know, having a sufficient understanding. So to me, we could end up going back and forth about can we ask for a site plan or not. I think it's quite clear that what we should be asking for is more details on the concept plan about these items. To me, that's a path that we can make some progress on.
Well, and that seems to be consistent with what we have done in the past as well.
Yep.
And I would just say, picking up on some of the things that were said in the comments, I have concerns about the water. I understand that, you know, nearly an 80-acre site, that there are probably other options. This is an area we see more and more intensity of use. Probably some things were done historically that may not have been approved today.
Yeah.
So I do think that it is smart to be cautious with water use on this parcel, especially since this parcel seems to have the trend. And I know folks buy the land and then need to figure out a way to monetize their investment. But as that becomes increasingly commercial in nature and has more demand on the water table, I do think it is smart to have a better handle on the usage and what the property has to offer, so we don't overtax that and the neighboring parcels. I did want to comment as the only person on the commission that deals with the budget every year. I think it's irresponsible to say that everything that yields tax revenue should be approved. I think that's the job of this body and the Board of Supervisors to take the budget into due consideration every year and to figure out a way to make things balance. And one of the ways we do that is through the meals and lodging tax, which is not a large percentage of the budget by any stretch of the imagination. That shouldn't be a primary factor in considering whether we approve something or not. Otherwise, we'd approve everything because it would fill our coffers. And so, while I appreciate that that's always an argument, I do believe that if we make the right decisions in other regards, the coffers will take care of themselves.
So let's get back to talk about if we want the applicant to come back next month and kind of bring some additional info, please. I would like to see a little bit more of a concept plan of the banquet center, you know, make a artist rendering of it, a little bit of a floor plan, footprint of it, dimensions. And same thing with the 3 guest cottages there.
Same thing on
the 3 cottages that are being built, the rooms. And can you be a little bit more finite, please, on the parking? Parking on how the traffic flow is going to be on the interior of the site between the event center up there and the Rock and the Polo Arena, whether you're planning on parking the people up at the banquet facility or they're going to park down here and walk up there, just so that we know where the impact is and flow, okay? And when it comes to this water issue, you know, I wish we could accurately say what's below the surface. And we got into this in Sperryville when they did the golf course. Everybody was thinking that, you know, that it was going to drain all the water from Sperryville, and they did this hydrological study and looked at the reservoir and the annual flow of water that was coming in up there and what was being taken out, you know, it was an educated guess, but it showed basically almost no impact on what was being done, you know, and what the concern up there was that, you know, they was watering a couple of greens. It was basically like 1.5 acres that they was watering, and they were concerned about that. And here, with this property here, again, when you look at that map there and you look at what's going on between Rose Hill, the high school, outside physical therapy with all the people coming in there to work out, and then I didn't even know it was a brewery there off the Christmas Tree Lane. I didn't know it was a brewery. And, you know, that takes water, a lot of water. So, you know, to get into this water issue with the amount of land that he has, I think we're going down the wrong road on that water issue. It's going to be using water, but that water problem can be addressed on site with this acreage.
It seems to me, and maybe there's a lot of material here, and I'm going to overlook it, but it seems to me having the information on the existing location and volume of the wells from those permits, is that something we have? Have
we seen those? I mean, I maybe.
He probably has, I don't know, on the new house that he just finished, it's probably a well log of that
I
one.
think there would be, I mean, I feel like, I take your point that we can't really adequately do some kind of water balance on it, but to understand, you know, what the current water supply is to the place strikes me as a key thing for us to understand.
I mean, you could go to the well logs and see if the health department can supply you with the well logs of the surrounding properties to see what, you know, and that's an indication, some indication of groundwater.
Permits on these, would they have a flow rate? Do you happen to know what you have on your wells?
They only do that when they drill, so you don't know how old, when they drilled the well, the rock itself. It could be, you know, 10 years ago, you may have one, but if it was, you know, 60s or 70s, you probably won't. But you would have one on the new house that was done. And the things built next door off of Christmas Tree Lane, Rose Hill, they probably have, and that's right next door, would have well logs. And the high school across the street, they would have a well, some type of indication of their water volume. So that's all a good indication of what is in the ground, and it's not a $20,000 item you gotta try to address. What does the board think of that information?
Comment about that. We don't know down in the ground how the veins of water run. I'm not so concerned that he won't have enough water to take care of his, but my concern is he keeps on drawing water and drawing water. How's it going to affect these neighbors over here? And again, we don't have the knowledge to know how the veins of water run.
So how do you solve that problem?
I don't know.
Short of drilling wells, how do you solve the
Well,
problem?
if you drill another well, then you're just gonna take more water away from the
So
other.
we cut off all the houses in Rappahannock County from building new because they're gonna take
No,
water from somebody
no.
else? I mean, he's got 79 acres. I mean, if he was in a 1 acre subdivision, look at Chester Gap. Up to Chester Gap, every lot up there is a 1/4 of an acre and everybody has a well.
Okay.
And they all got water up there,
Okay.
most of the time, right?
But it doesn't mean that we got water down here. There's no scientific way of drilling wells. And again, all I'm asking is, I think that this 600 gallons is something that was pulled out of there. I don't think we would have scientific.
So you want that readdressed?
Yes, I want that.
You want that readdressed by the health department?
Right.
More detail, okay, that's one thing that you need to do.
I would concur with that, and I would also to ask that we revisit my concerns about the high school, and particularly high volume events like homecoming and things of that nature.
I think an important thing here, back up to this water, is to look at the neighbors' wells. If you got, you know, 25, 50, 100 gallon wells, and it's a number of them, I think it's a good indication it's groundwater. If you got a number of wells at 2 gallons, 3 gallons a minute, I think that reads something else.
I agree that it would be helpful to have that. I understand it's not going to be conclusive, and, you know, but I do think if the water is a concern, which it clearly seems to be, at least, you know, in terms of something we're questioning, I think that.
I mean, Loudoun County, if you do a lot in Loudoun County, 10-acre lot, you drill a well.
Yeah.
You drill a well when you get your lot approved. You do a 100-acre subdivision, 10 lots, you drill 10 wells. And so that they can verify there's water. Short of doing that, you know, everything in the ground's a guess, only God knows.
Right, well, I would just say that additional data sets on where these wells are on this property and flow rates on them and data sets on additional data sets on neighboring properties would be very helpful. And I do realize how unpredictable it is, because you can also build something and unknowingly impact how your neighbors aquifer that too, for the better or for the worse.
Mr. Brown, do you think maybe we could research the 2 wells on this property to see what the flow rates are, if history exists, and maybe collect from the health department some well log information on the surrounding properties? As many as you can get.
Comment about the traffic issue at the high school and everything. just something for you to think about. Currently, you have a decel lane. You may want to consider putting an XL lane on the right when you go out. So that way you allow traffic coming out of your place to stack up on this XL lane to get it to merge out into the traffic when they got these heavy traffic events. That's something you may want to consider.
I think I think you need to go back to VDOT and express our concerns about the high school, and they can readdress it so they can say what is needed.
I would also submit that we would have some ability to put some limits on timing of events if it seems that would be a significant concern. So I do think this is a manageable matter, and it should begin with trying to understand what the experts say about the flow, but I do think we have another set of levers there. It might be a little hard to articulate exactly, but I think we could do it.
If you want to talk hypotheticals, I mean, when we get all this information, we may say, okay, you have one event every weekend for 200 people instead of two for 200 people. If there's a water issue or something like that, we could take away one of the lots, and have more open space here. It creates more flexibility on things. So, I mean, once they come back next month, there's things that we can do to address our concerns. But once we get this additional information, does that sound reasonable, Madam Chairman?
Yes, sir. Did you want to make a motion to the horizon?
I think we made a list of items. Michelle, you want to read them? And we'll.
So what I have is a more detailed concept plan, addressing traffic, the traffic flow of the interior of the site, the banquet center, a footprint, more details on that, the 3 cottages, or rooms that are proposed, more details on the actual parking, more detail on the water, the 600 gallons by the health department, what the flow rates are on the wells already on the site, and if there's well log of the surrounding properties, and have VDOT revisit their comments, taking in consideration events at the high school. I think that's everything.
It kind of got our feel on some things, and I'm going to be very bold here and just kind of do a little interpretation here. I think your use of Christmas tree lane is going to shock the commission, maybe shock your neighbors. So no use of Christmas tree, or very, very, very limited use of Christmas tree is kind of what it may be in the future, not knowing what's going to be done next month, but no use or limited use of Christmas tree is a better for this application. Probably. I'm not speaking for everybody, but just
It is a sensitivity.
Sensitivity.
There is historically a log of concerns regarding the use, and I would say overuse of Christmas tree lighting. And while you may say it's only 1 or 2 cars or 1 or 2 houses, it feels like death by 1,000 cuts for the people that live there.
And if you're going to be maybe doing in the future Airbnb or whatever, that use may access may want to stay on this property. Just, I think that would make for better neighbors for everyone. So that's my motion to table it to next month with the applicant to work on addressing these issues.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Lyon, any further discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you next month. You're welcome to stay or go.
We're still here for the next one.
Oh, that's right. So sorry. That went so well. I thought we were done. Now that takes us to special exception 23-07-03, the Blue Rocky and Foresttown, and 28-48. Michelle?
Yes, ma'am. Special exception 230703, Dowling Real Estate has applied for a special exception to continue their use of their tourist home located at 12567 Lee Highway. The property is 79 acres in size, it's zoned agricultural. In 2005, the owner at the time applied and obtained a special permit for a second dwelling on the parcel. That permit was 05-1202. It was approved with the conditions, health department approval and no commercial use, being that the dwelling was not to be used in conjunction with the Blue Rock. The home was started at some point but never completed when Mr. Dowling purchased the property and finished the construction of that home. In 2001, two applications, I think that's 21 applications were made. Two applications were made. One was for, 2021. Two applications were made. One to use that second dwelling as a tourist home, and the other to eliminate the condition of the existing permit, no commercial use. Both were approved. The special exception for the more than one dwelling took off, amended the condition of the commercial use to commercial uses within the second dwelling structure are prohibited except during the next 2 years, starting on August 2nd of 21. The owner now is requesting that condition be removed from that permit. The health department commented the home was approved for 7-bedroom rental with reduced water flow conditions. The house is limited to 999 gallons per day. BDOT commented they had no objections to the request.
Thank you, Michelle. Mr. Brown, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promise to be brief. This tourist home, I know that you will remember, you were on the Board of Supervisors when it came before you to remove that no commercial use restriction. Ultimately, this commission approved, recommended approval of the tourist home use, and it went up to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors approved that and removed that no commercial use restriction, but put a time limit on it. I think the board members, my recollection of the discussion was the board members wanted to see how it went. Let's limit it. Let's see if there are any problems, any complaints, and then come back in a couple of years and you can apply for a renewal. And that's why we're here this evening. We confirmed with, before we filed the application for the renewal of that, we confirmed with Ms. Summers and with Mr. Curry that there had been no complaints of any kind. There haven't been any fire and rescue calls. There haven't been any sheriff's office calls. And at this point, the applicant would simply ask that the tourist home use be approved, that no commercial use restriction be eliminated entirely. But other than that, all of the conditions that the application, that the prior permit was subject to, all of those conditions stay in place with no changes. The dwelling was, when it was originally built, just to address the one mention of the capacity, it was approved for 7 bedrooms, but because of the limitations in our ordinance, it is only allowed to be rented out for use for up to 5 rooms, 10 occupancy, and that would still, of course, because that's our ordinance, that would be a condition of the permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. With that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing on the special exception 23-07-03 for the Blue Rock Inn tourist home. Anyone that wishes to speak, please come to the microphone, Ms. Meyer.
The only reason they don't have any complaints is because I don't complain. But it is a special exception on top of a special exception, and we're here again for more special exceptions and more special exceptions. We need to halt. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this application? Yes.
Well, good evening. It's been a long evening, and I get to say my two cents worth. I'm Margaret Bond from the Piedmont District. I'm here to speak in support of Mr. Dowling's application for another period of renewal for the farmhouse special exception permit, to use that as a tourist home. I don't have standing as a neighbor to talk about the Blue Rock property, but I do have a great deal of personal knowledge of the Blue Rock farm portion of the property. I keep some horses there, and I go down the farm lane and past the farmhouse 5 times a week, all different times of the day and so forth, and I see it all year round. And I do know where the wells are, by the way. I know it very well. The farmhouse really is a lovely house. Mr. Dowling did a first-class job in restoring what had been the original structure. It was falling into disrepair, and I testified to the subject 2 years ago when this special exception permit application came up the first time. He's restored and enhanced the original structure. It looks picture perfect as an old-time farmhouse on an original agricultural setting. And he maintains the grounds impeccably. In the time that I've been there, the last 2 years, I've never seen more than 5 cars parked at the farmhouse. Tenants have all been quiet, very little traffic up and down the road, so the concern about dust and air pollution and noise and so forth, I think are really very minimal on that. So I think that the farmhouse and its uses fit very harmoniously with the overall Blue Rock Farm operation. I don't know how many of you are aware, but the Blue Rock Farm originally had operated as a horse training facility, and the barns situated on the western boundary also open up into a large area, grazing area. So this farmhouse is part of the overall farm concept. Could we put that site plan up there, possibly? The concept plan. Great. The operations on the farm take place all year long. The farmhouse doesn't really impact the farm use, with the exception of they share a well. That's where I remember one of the wells is. And but it does not cause problems. Now that I've opened the door about farm property, I want to walk through it. Go ahead and squeeze that down a little bit. One of the parts of the special exception that you addressed earlier tonight was that the Rappahannock High School cross-country team be allowed to use the steeplechase track. There's a large, you can see it, steeplechase track all the way around the trees. This is a double fenced area. All the way around goes to the far end of the property and comes back around. So the horse farm part of the property is really from this fence back in that direction. This is taken up by the vineyard, the farmhouse, and so forth. The cross-country team is allowed by the special exception terms to use the perimeter of the property for its cross-country events. And it's been, I guess, the last 20, 30 years, they've used the steeplechase track. They may have an interest in how that's configured in the future. The farmhouse really has very little impact on the farm operations. And I'd say extending the Sept for another period of years wouldn't impact the agricultural use of the property. And it might be some consideration to take a look at the impact of the other construction proposed for that site in terms of the farm operation. Restricted it quite a bit with that proposed construction, parcel 3, and then there are two fields that are part of the farm operation now.
Wait. Are we talking about the previous application, or are we concentrating on the tourist home?
The tourist home, parcel 2, has 2 fields attached to it. They would be taken out of the farm operation, as I understand it, based on parcel 2. So you're restricting the use of the farm operations by parcel 2, parcel 3. And parcel 2 is where the farmhouse is located. So I don't know if you separate out use of the farmhouse from proposal to separate out into parcel 2. But that would have an impact on the farm operation. But as far as how the house has been used, it's been lovely. It's been no problems. It's been very little awareness of its use or occupancy for the farm operation. It doesn't seem to me there's any reason why that special use permit shouldn't be continued.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this application? If no one else wishes to speak on the application for the tourist home at Blue Rock,
the farmhouse, this tourist home use would be over on this parcel. But at this point,
That's the only connection.
It's 179 acre parcel, it's a tourist home use on that 79 acre parcel. And there's no dependency, whatsoever.
So I think everybody's getting a little tired, but I'm going to ask one question here that it's a thought process. So this property is self-sufficient in terms of well and septic of its own on the property around the house. I guess the only somatic thing that we have to consider is that we are approving this today on the 79.56 acres. 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if the other application is approved, it would be on a 10-acre site. That's right?
It's entirely dependent on what happens with the other application.
Right, but maybe. We hope it does. You do, hope it does. Right. So at that point in time, do we need to put language in here that this can be, if at a later date, that if it's on a 10-acre parcel, the permit survives? Or is this considered a sale or transfer by the creation of a new lot that voids the permit?
The original permit had a provision that said if the property was sold, that the permit would expire. I submit to you that that's still an appropriate condition for the permit.
But the site size goes from 79 acres to 10 acres.
Right, that's not a sale of property.
Just something for the board to consider.
Is the minimum lot size crossed?
Isn't the ag area is 10 acres, right?
Correct.
10?
Yeah.
So it stays above 10.
Yeah. Again, assuming hypothetically that the board does end up approving the subdivision, which is still, of course, up in the air, by definition, we're not going to be able to go under the 10-acre minimum for tourist home. Right. Because then we would be.
This is a good conversation to have, so there's no catch it.
I appreciate that. And I want to point out that again, a condition that is currently in the permit, the expired permit, that provides for the property sold permit would expire. Then if Mr. Dowling were to create that, be permitted to create the subdivision, create that subdivision, and then sell this house with the parcel of the tourist home.
Determined.
But
I didn't want anybody to question that since it went from 79 acres to 10 acres, that the permit was no longer valid. I think any motion to approve should say that in the event that the site size changes down to greater than the minimum 10-acre requirement for a tourist home, this permit is still valid. Just
the ordinance
just
to do that anyway, but I mean, obviously.
This has never happened before.
I agree, and I don't have a problem with saying something that the ordinance relies on.
Yeah. There are attorneys in the county who interpret things differently.
Mr. Lake, did you have anything?
No, this was what I was trying to get at with respect to the dependencies. There is a dependency of, the only thing that seems to be an issue is the eventual parcel size of this operation that we're approving, which I think we've now kind of teased out. At least it doesn't cross any boundaries of the ordinance if it stays above 10 acres. So I think that has helped me. I don't have any other questions. My preference would be, I mean, I don't quite, maybe I'm also missing the issue of the expiration and whether this really should be, or is there a compelling reason to do this on a separate track as the other one. I tend to feel like this incrementalism causes some challenges for us, and personally I would like to have a more comprehensive picture than to proceed piecemeal. But I don't know that I've got a full grip on all the compelling circumstances there.
And we really would ask the planning commission, I appreciate your comments, Mr. White, we would ask the planning commission if you're inclined to, please go ahead and advance it. At this point, that's a structure that we can't use if the permit has expired. And there is no dependency on what happens with the other application. So if the planning commission ever are inclined to, we certainly would ask that you act on this one.
And what was the rental history and frequency? Was it rented on a regular basis, or?
I think we gave a figure in there.
Okay.
Madam Chair, was it 81%?
Okay, so it was very robust in terms of its rental history. And certainly if there had been an opportunity for folks to report, it wasn't like, sometimes we run into people in the past requested a family apartment, and we would grant the family apartment, and then no family stays there, and 2 years later, oh, you just got another house on your property. So I just wanted to make sure that we had given an opportunity for feedback with this use. So certainly 80% did that. Mr. Atkins?
I'm okay with the staff recommendation there.
Mr. Sis?
Well, we just, earlier in the evening, approved the Dotson residence, which was 6.9 acres.
Yeah.
And then she had the adjoining 58, so even if you change it to 10, you still have the adjoining, what, 69?
Well, unless they sell it.
Well, yeah, but the same thing applies to her too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see the 10 acres versus, 10 acres shouldn't be a problem if 6.9 wasn't a problem.
Ms. Ritter?
I think this application is fine. We should forward it.
Mr. Schuler?
I was just curious as to why this one didn't have the condition that it can't be sublet or rented to a third party or timeshare.
We can add that.
How about you not? I don't think that's the way to fix the problem. I'm just curious if there was a particular reason.
So, Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we pass this on with an approval to the Board of Supervisors as stated, and with the statement that in the event that this property becomes a separate parcel down to a site size of greater than 10 acres, the permit is still valid.
All right, thank you, Mr. Henry. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sisk. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, and now you're free to leave or stay, however you like. We welcome you to stay, but you're certainly free to go. And we will look forward to seeing you next month. To the public comment portion of the evening, anyone that would like to speak on any number of items is welcome to approach the microphone and make their comments at this time. All right. If there's no one wishing to speak, we'll move out of public comment. No new business. That takes us to informational, Michelle. It's just our list from the supervisors.
Correct. I don't have anything to add.
I don't have anything either. It seems like the supervisors have their plate full. And for roundtable discussion, I would just let everyone know that I did draft a list of bullet points from our Berkeley group discussion last week. 4 items that we would request input from the supervisors on, including additional subdivision rights, penalties for zoning violations, everything we discussed and sort of had gray areas on, so that the board can take it up at its next regularly scheduled meeting. And then, does anyone have anything else for roundtable discussion?
Could you, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but is there a brief summary of where we stand with the sign ordinance? Is that coming back to us? Do you have?
I do not anticipate that it will come back to us. I will say that I had hoped that my peers on the board, our last meeting, I thought our way forward after the public hearing at the board level was for the board to come back together and to have worked through the comments from the public, and our staff has worked through a red line version based on small grammatical and spelling changes that the public pointed out. So those changes have been made by staff. I am awaiting feedback from my peers as to what changes they would like to see in the sign ordinance, but I do not anticipate them sending that back to the planning commission level. I think everyone realizes, and certainly I look now that, we're sending more up to the board for feedback, and we haven't cleared the sign ordinance yet, which is not obviously where I wanted to be, but it is where we are, and we will work through it diligently. I would say my summation to my fellow board members is I really felt like there were a handful of issues that the public had concerns about. Hay bale signs, off-site signage, fluttering signs, animated signs, things of that nature. The intensity of small signs on personal lots and flags. There seemed to be a handful of items that I was hoping we could work through relatively quickly. We will gather our thoughts and move forward as the board can, and certainly we want to stay in step with the public as we work through that as well.
Thank you for that summary.
And I will certainly do my part and always bring up our careful deliberations at this level in the hopes of furthering board discussions and letting folks know how we arrived at our decisions. Is there any other question or discussion from the commission? All right. If no one has anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Light, and a second. Thank you, Ms. Ritter. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.